Hi, and welcome to aboutmashiach.com. In this video, we're going to be exploring how the Torah looks at rainbows, a few types of rainbows, how it connects to Mashiach, and also the future of transportation. So to start with the story of the rainbow in the Torah, when Noah and his family departed the ark, after spending a whole year over there and about to start a new life, a new chapter in humanity, a chapter in history, God presented some terms and conditions for Noah and his family to keep in order for the world to keep existing and not having to go through the same experience that they just went through. Firstly, he starts with a few privileges, and the first one being that animals will start fearing human beings because before the flood, it wasn't like that. The humanity descended to a very low level, and they basically, when an animal saw a human being, it looked like like an animal to it, and therefore it wasn't a good experience. It wasn't very safe, as it says, "Nimshal kabehemot nidmu." However, after the flood, that's changed, and therefore God tells them that yes, you are going to be a bit higher than animals now, and animals will start fearing you again. Now, not only that, but from now on, you are able to consume meat because you're on a higher level. You're able to elevate meat and then consume it. So that's another privilege. However, and now comes a set of obligations. The first obligation is that we are not allowed to consume living organisms, so they have to be dead first. And even though we're allowed to kill animals, we cannot murder human beings. And the Torah elaborates about that. And then the last obligation is the obligation to reproduce, which is the opposite of murdering. So murdering is taking someone's life away, and reproduction means that you're bringing life into the world. Also interesting to note that the act of reproduction is similar to a bow and an arrow. Speaking about the rainbow, it's very similar because there's a bow and there's an arrow, and the action of shooting is very similar. So that's the obligation to reproduce. And then the on God's side of the deal, he committed, so to speak, to not bring destruction to the world. That's his side of the deal. And the sign for this covenant is the rainbow. And then the rainbow appears in the sky. This is the sign, and the sign is taken out and invoked when we don't keep our side of the deal. Then God sort of reminds us of the deal that we signed up to, and this is the rainbow. As Rashi says, "Be'aneni anan al haaretz," when I'll contemplate to bring destruction to the world, I will remember I'll see the rainbow and remember the covenant. Now let's have a look at the ingredients of the rainbow. There's two main ingredients besides the drops of the rain. The first one is the sun, and the sun represents God in this world, as it says in Psalms, "Ki shemesh umagen Hashem Elokim." This name of God is compared to the sun, and this is because just like the sun is always shining, so too God's name is always radiant, even though we don't see it just like we don't see the sun in the night, we also don't see or don't experience the divine rays of God's name in the world during exile. So that's the sun. Now, in terms of the clouds represent the earth. The sun represents God, but the clouds represent the earth, and they're going to come together, as we'll soon see. But in terms of clouds, there's also a few types of clouds. Firstly, the physical clouds are produced from the earth, as it says in the story of creation, "Ve'ed ya'aleh min haaretz," the cloud ascends from the earth. And not only physically, like scientifically, but also the deeds of humanity, the way that humanity conducts itself, also impacts the clouds and rain. As it says in Bechukotai Telechu, if you keep my laws, I'll provide rain in its time. And also in terms of humanity in general, across the world, we find that the way that the nations behave also determines whether they're going to have rain. So that's physical clouds. There's also spiritual clouds. Now, the spiritual clouds, they're still physical, but they have a spiritual significance, and we find that by the cloud of incense, Anan HaKetoret, which was formed in the service of Yom Kippur, in the holiest day of the year, in the holiest part of that day, and also the holiest place, but the holiest person. So it has a very big significance, that cloud, because it reflects the type of the cloud that was formed is dependent on the level of repentance of the people during that year. So that's a cloud with spiritual significance. And we also have semi-spiritual clouds, the physical clouds, but they actually enable a spiritual experience, like we find by the cloud that God appeared to Moses uh, by Mount Sinai. It says there, Hineni ba'elecha be'av ha'anan, I'm going to appear to you in the thickness of the cloud. So, so that enabled the spiritual experience for Moses and also for the Jewish people. And we, on the other hand, we also find that sins that we make are compared to a cloud, just like a cloud blocks the sun from appearing on the earth, so to our sins block our relationship with God. So there's all kinds of clouds. However, all of them represent the state of the earth, state of humanity, as it is in the sky in terms of physical things, or in heaven if it's a spiritual cloud. This is what clouds are about. Now, now we can understand the rainbow and why the rainbow is something new that happened when after the flood. Because before the flood, there was no rainbow, even though it's a spiritual, it's a physical, scientific occurrence. Not so. Why wasn't there rainbow before the flood? The commentaries give different reasons for it. Whether the clouds were too coarse before the flood and they became finer. Another opinion is that the clouds covered the whole sky and therefore there was no chance for the sun to appear. And then there's also opinions that say that the sun's rays were too weak. But either way, there was no rainbow before the flood, and now the rainbow appears. And the idea is that the flood, what it did to the world, it soaked the whole world with water, but also infused it with what's called in Hebrew bitul, which basically means that the world is going to be less coarse and less defined, even though it's still coarse and defined. However, relatively speaking, it's less coarse and defined than what it was before, to enable the earth to reflect godliness. Just like the clouds reflect the sun, the earth is going to be able to reflect godliness, and that's going to produce the rainbow. And practically speaking, that means that humanity is able to observe the seven Noahide laws. Now let's see how these seven Noahide laws relate to the rainbow and how the rainbow reminds us of that. So, like we said, the rainbow, it's going to be called, it's a normal rainbow because we're going to soon see that there's other types of rainbow. And the Zohar calls this rainbow a dark rainbow because it reminds us of things that we need to fix. So it's not necessarily a good sign. So it's a sign that that it's a God's reaction to the actions of humanity. So the way we behave, God interacts with that. So that's how the sun interacts with the clouds and produces the rainbow. But it depends on what humanity does, and the actions of humanity basically divide into three realms, and that's why there's three primary colors to the rainbow. One is kindness. On the other side, you've got justice, and in the middle, you've got compassion. The three realms of service of what we need to fix in this world and how we need to conduct ourselves. And those three divide into, just like these three primary colors divide into seven colors in the rainbow. So to these three realms of service also divide into the seven Noahide laws, which correspond to the seven colors of the rainbow. And it's interesting to note that one of the colors that's missing, or the color that's missing in the LGBT rainbow, which is only has six colors, is the color that represents forbidden relations, which they have a fundamental problem with. But either way, these three realms are the realms that we need to correct and work on in this world. And if we don't, if we have a problem with it, then that's when the rainbow comes to remind us of this of what we need to do. So this is the dark rainbow. Now let's have a look at what the brighter rainbow represents, or what does it look like? What is it? The Zohar talks about this type of rainbow. It's a bright rainbow. So let's look and see what the Zohar says. Firstly, it's going to have bright colors. Bigvanin nehirin. So bright colors, and it's a sign for us to seek God and Mashiach. As it says, "Uvikshu et David et Hashem Elokehem et David Malkam." To seek God and Mashiach, this is a sign for us to start doing. So this is, I guess, a higher level of service beyond those seven laws, or the basic laws of humanity. And it's also a sign for God to remember that we are still in exile. As it says, and Hashem will remember that we're still in exile when He sees the rainbow, and He will take us out. So this is the sign of when you see such a rainbow, then this is the time that we need to wait and anticipate the coming of Mashiach. So in terms of brightness, when we speak about brightness, it doesn't really explain what it means, but I guess it means that you feel more of the sun, more of God in the world, as opposed to the colors, which is more the darker side of things. So with that, we can understand the deeper meaning of the rainbow. So Chazal say that firstly, Ezekiel, the prophet, when he describes the glory of God that he's experienced, he compares it to the image of the rainbow. And therefore, the sages learn from that it's not respectful to gaze at the rainbow, because that's the glory of God that's appearing. And the Midrash takes it even further. It says that the name rainbow, Keshet in Hebrew, is synonymous with davar hamukash li. It's not synonymous to tantamount to God Himself. So it's even a higher level. So we see there's different levels of godliness, which the rainbow represents, and the idea is again for the earth to reflect God. So just like the clouds reflect the sun, the earth should reflect God. That's the goal of creation. In other words, that you're going to look at the world and you're going to see godliness. And in fact, this is the ultimate state of the world, as it says in Isaiah, that the earth will be full of the knowledge of God, just like the water covers the seabed. So you're going to see godliness everywhere. And this is the deeper meaning of the rainbow, what the rainbow comes to remind us of. Now, we mentioned the clouds and different types of clouds, and that the achievements, our achievements are reflected in the clouds, like it goes up to the heaven, and therefore it's not only a collective thing, that the way humanity behaves is how the clouds form, but also it's a personal thing. It's a person's personal achievements are sort of stored in the cloud. And it gives them just this recent expression of stored in the cloud actually is reflective spiritually of how our deeds or whatever we do in this world goes up to the heaven, and it gets stored in heaven until Mashiach comes, and then it becomes revealed. Now, another thing to note is, as explained in a different article on the website, that when Mashiach comes, one of the central themes that will change is that the physical world and the spiritual worlds will come and be united again as they were in the beginning of creation. So physical and spiritual will be the same thing. So whatever is now separate, you've got a spiritual experience or a spiritual achievement that would be expressed physically when Mashiach comes. And with that, we can understand how people evaluate other people and their wealth in this world. They look at what car they drive, not what house they live or what shoes they wear, but it's particularly the car that they drive around that represents their wealth in this world. And when Mashiach comes, it's going to be different, obviously, but it's going to be essentially the same idea. People will look at what clouds people will ride, because those spiritual of clouds, which will become physical, that were produced by people's um, achievements in this world, they'll come back from heaven into this world and carry the individual. This will be his reward. They'll carry the individual where to the levels or to the places that he needs to go. And we see this in a few places. Firstly, in the book of Daniel, he describes Mashiach's coming, like coming on the clouds of the sky. Imanane Shmaya, comes on the clouds. That's a very clear allusion to um, some transportation of Mashiach, but that really refers to Mashiach himself. What about everybody else? So Isaiah already prophesied, and when he saw the vision of the ingathering of the exiles, he described it as people flying like clouds and like doves. The sort of double expression, which we'll soon see. However, most of the commentaries explain this as just an analogy, like a cloud and like doves, but not exactly on clouds. However, he goes at the end of his book, he says something. He ends with a prophecy that that it should be that what's going to happen is that every first of the month, every new moon, and every Shabbat, every Saturday, every flesh that will be around in this world, that will be left, would be coming to bow down before God in the temple. Now, the Midrash comments on this, and he asks, well, how Psikta Rabbatit, it's a Midrash written by Rav Kahana. He quotes this verse, Midei Chodesh v'Chodshoi, and he asks how are they going to be? Everybody's going to come like what on get a flight once a week or even more than once a week, up and down. Doesn't how is it going to happen? So he says that how they come, Ela he'avim ba'im v'to'anin otam u've'im otam liYerushalayim. The clouds are going to come and onboard them and take them to Yerushalayim. It's going to be a very swift experience. So here we see a clear illusion of how these clouds that we talked about before is what is going to be transporting people up and down. He actually goes on and says, he quotes the other verse that we mentioned before, which was a double expression, like a cloud and like doves. And he says it actually refers to when Rosh Chodesh, when the new moon falls on Saturday, then they're going to come twice, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. And that's the double reference. One's like a cloud and the other one like doves, which come back to their nest or the cot in the afternoon. So if we just to summarize what we've learned in this video, we've got different periods in history. The first period was before the flood, where the clouds were too coarse and there was no rainbow, and keeping the laws was very, very hard. After the flood, the clouds became finer because the world was more refined, and then the rainbow appeared because of that, but it was with dark colors, which reminds us of the commandments that we need to keep during this time. And then just when we fulfill the commandments and when we follow them, then eventually Mashiach comes, and just before Mashiach comes, the clouds are even more refined, and the rainbow appears in bright colors, and then we see the rainbow is more representative of the glory of God that is achieved through the commandments that we kept. And then after Mashiach comes, the clouds will be used for transportation. And in terms of the rainbow, it possibly is that it will become even brighter, representing even higher levels of godliness that would be experienced by the world. So there you go. That's rainbows, Mashiach, and transportation in this video.